This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
A major conference on counter-terrorism and fighting extremism gets underway in the Kenyan capital. We update you on the protests by Shiite Muslims in Nigeria's capital. And more reactions after the conviction of Bosco Ntaganda by the International Criminal Court. Hello and a very warm welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also coming up this hour. In business, unions in Zimbabwe reject a $21 million pay increment from the government. And we hear from a galaxy of stars featuring in a remake of a Disney classic with rich African content. We start the hour here in Kenya, where a regional counter-terrorism conference is underway in Nairobi. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, as well as the AU Commission Chair Musa Faki Mahamat, are among the dignitaries in attendance. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta is also attending the meeting. The conference is looking to find solutions to global terrorism. In his opening statements, Guterres urged the international community to help Africa build its capacity to fight terrorism. Musa Faki Mahamat also said the UN must assume its responsibilities in fighting terrorism on the continent. Now, East Africa itself has been the target of a number of major terrorist attacks. CGTN's Daniel Arap-Moy walks us through the history of militant attacks in the region.
Al-Qaeda's first major attack, August 1998. Al-Qaeda stages its first major terror attack in East Africa, bombing the U.S. embassies in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. 2006 to 2009. Al-Shabaab gains prominence by waging war on the Ethiopian military in Somalia. July 11, 2010, Al-Shabaab targets Uganda. Coordinated bombings kill 74 people in the Ugandan capital Kampala, marking Al-Shabaab's first major assault outside Somalia. September 21, 2013, Westgate Mall attacked. 4 Al-Shabaab militants stormed Nairobi's Westgate Mall, a symbol of Kenya's emerging middle class, killing 67 people during a 4-day siege. April 2, 2015, Al-Shabaab attacks Kenyan University. Al-Shabaab launched assault on Garissa University College in Kenya, killing 148 mainly students. April 2017, Islamist militants attacked Tanzania. Militants ambushed and killed 8 police officers just outside Kibiti on the Tanzanian coast. October 14, 2017, Somalia struck by deadliest ever attack. Al-Shabaab truck bomb in Mogadishu killed at least 587 people in the deadliest terror attack in Somalia's history. January 15, 2019, luxury hotel attacked. Al-Shabaab claims responsibility for a deadly attack on a luxury hotel complex in Nairobi, Kenya.
The people of Africa are on the front line of efforts to tackle terrorism and the spread of violent extremism. I deeply believe that African peace-enforcing and counter-terrorism operations must have strong and clear mandates by the UN Security Council, backed by sufficient, predictable and sustainable financial support, namely through assessed contributions.
I urge this conference, the African Union, and United Nations summits to come to deliberate and develop dynamic solutions that deny groups such as Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab a foothold and a space to grow within Africa.
And that, of course, was Kenya's President Uhuru Kenyatta addressing this conference on counterterrorism that is taking place here in Nairobi. A number of high-profile guests, of course, in attendance too. Let's get to the very latest now. We're joined by CGTN's Robert Nagila on the line for us here in Nairobi. Robert, of course, that meeting is now underway. Just talk us through the latest. What's coming out of that meeting? What is on today's agenda?
Well, thank you very much, Lindy. Well, first amongst those attending, of course, is the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, President Uhuru Kenyatta, Musa Faki from the African Union, and a host of other representatives from across the entire continent. Now, there appears to be a general consensus amongst the delegates here that the interventions currently being employed across the entire continent do not seem to be gaining more momentum. There seems to be a lull somewhere in between. You look at the situation in the Sahel region, you look at West Africa, and you look at Boko Haram as well. I beg your pardon, you look at Al-Shabaab as well. It looks like the forces that are fighting these terror groups appear to be stuck, if you could use that word. There's no movement, and that's what they're trying to figure out now. Where do we go from here? You had from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres saying that from the UN there needs to be a clear mandate so that UN personnel on the ground assisting African forces are not just lumped into any situation, but have a clear mandate, clear direction, and clear strategy on how to pursue their targets and their goals as well. Then there's also the issue of funding, which has been a major impediment in the fight against terrorism. That is also up for discussion here, amongst other interventions, which includes the sharing of intelligence and raising enough troops for these counterinsurgencies. Lindy?
We know that over the years, Robert, we know that, of course, African countries have invested a lot of money, as it is, a lot of intervention, a lot of military, a lot of intelligence into fighting terrorism. Is there a sense, though, that at the end of the day, these radical organizations, these terrorist outfits, still have the upper hand?
Absolutely, and you have to look at this from two different schools of thought. Number one, as you've rightly said, African countries are now spending much more on security. In fact, even more than development in some cases, and that this conference says it needs to change as well. And the only way that will change is by tackling the root cause of this of these terrorists. Now, fighting those root causes means going back to the drawing board, engaging the youth, not just in terms of job creation, but including them in the development process as well, but also getting them jobs with dignity, jobs that have dignity as well, making them feel a part of the development process. So all those things are now coming out over here. Another aspect of all this that needs to be looked at is how the terrorists are still managing to raise funds to conduct their activities in various regions across the entire continent, because despite the fact that a lot of loopholes have been shared, we've seen very many cases of money laundering coming up, African governments taking the extra step to shut down some of those loopholes. They're still managing to raise raise funds to conduct their activities. And then finally as well, you have to look at the recruitment process and the radicalization of this youth. Why is it that a lot of youth from across the continent feel that by joining some of these terror groups, then they're actually fulfilling not just a lifelong goal, but also getting funds to be able to assist their families and their communities. So all these things are tied somewhat, and it's this that this particular conference is seeking to unravel.
Multifaceted challenge. Thank you so much, Robert Nagila, keeping us up to speed on that counter-terrorism conference taking place here in Nairobi. Now, as, of course, Robert Nagila said, radicalization is one of the key challenges when it comes to tackling terrorism on the continent. The UN Secretary General earlier visited a Kenyan organization helping to combat extremism through an initiative targeting the youth.
A town hall in the Kamukunji area in Kenya's capital city, Nairobi, had a special guest, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres. Guterres listened as community representatives discussed projects aimed at combating violent extremism in their neighborhood.
It's much better to prevent than to respond. When we prevent conflict, when we prevent disease, when we prevent economic problems, when we prevent terrorism, we are not only avoiding the suffering of people, but we are also doing it in a cheaper way with less negative impact in the life of the community and in the businesses of the community.
He also visited the Jiongoze Project, an organization set on combating extremism in the area. The organization has empowered around 200 peer mentors who engage with their community to raise awareness on the dangers of violent extremism. Guterres also highlighted the growing challenge of youth unemployment.
The youth is facing enormous challenges. Youth unemployment is, as I said in the beginning, probably the biggest threat to our societies. But the youth has a much bigger capacity than the older generations to understand the digital world and to use the different tools.
Guterres commended the local organizations for their innovative approaches in combating extremism. Astatal, CGTN.
Let's turn now to news from Nigeria. The country's National Assembly was on lockdown on Tuesday after shots were fired outside during clashes between police and a group of Shia Muslim protesters. Both sides blamed the other for the shooting. Police say officers had used minimum force to disperse the protesters. CGTN's Laura Walubengo has more.
The Islamic Movement of Nigeria, a group that represents Nigeria's minority Shia Muslims, tried to enter Parliament complex and sparked a confrontation with police. IMN members protest regularly outside the National Assembly in the capital, Abuja. They're calling for the release of their leader, Ibrahim El-Zakzaki, who's been in detention since 2015. On Tuesday, though, police used tear gas and live bullets on the protesters.
We moved to the National Assembly. On arrival at the National Assembly, the police officers there started shooting tear gas. They were shooting tear gas. Going back, we followed them till the next gate. We decided to stay at the next gate to wait for the members because they have already violated everything. At that junction, everything is calm. But a police officer from inside shoot tear gas and he shoots live ammunition. He shot one of us, he fell down and he died instantly.
In a statement, police say 2 officers were shot and wounded in the legs, and 6 other officers were injured by individuals using clubs and stones.
They could have killed me. Look at me. Look at me. I was just driving past gently. I had an appointment. So you can see who is going to take care of this. And they were calling missiles. You can see some of them still inside my car. So this is what we have.
Authorities have arrested 40 protesters. The assembly remained on lockdown as of late Tuesday afternoon. For more than 3 decades, the Shia Muslim group has had regular run-ins with security forces in Nigeria while demonstrating against perceived religious persecution. Laura Walubengo, CGTN.
Worrying developments there in Nigeria's capital. Let's bring you the very latest now. CGTN's Phil Ihaza joins us from Abuja. Phil, has calm been restored in the Nigerian capital, and what measures are in place to ensure public safety?
Well, so far, calm has indeed been restored to the nation's capital, Abuja. The Inspector General of Police have also ordered 24-hour surveillance on the Federal Capital Territory and its environs to further forestall any form of breakdown of law and order. He has also instructed the commissioners of police and top officials of the police to ensure that there's maximum security all around the clock in the capital. He has also assured, the populace, the citizens of Abuja, to return to their normal lawful duties as calm has been restored.
And just talk us through, Phil, the heart of the grievances from these protesters and whether or not their demands are likely to be met.
If you look at if you just go back a bit in history, first of all, we know that there are 2 denominations of Islam, the pro-Iran Shia or Shiite Muslim sect and the pro-Saudi Arabia Sunni Muslim sect. In Nigeria, the pro-Iran Shia or Shiite Muslim sect are the minority, and the Islamic Movement of Nigeria is an offshoot of the Shia Muslim sect, which is led by the Ibrahim el-Zakzaky, started in some time back in 1980 in Nigeria. The government has alleged that the group does not recognize any law or constitution of the country, and they are looking to create a sort of state for themselves. Now, in 2015, the leader and his wife was arrested after a clash between the Nigerian army and the followers of the Islamic movement of Nigeria. Now, the army accused the followers of creating some sort of blockade and trying to assassinate the army chief. The followers also said that hundreds, over 300 of their members were killed in that clash, including 3 of the sons of el-Zakzaky. Now, since 2015 up until now, the leader and his wife have been detained. In 2016, December, there was a federal high court order to release the leader, but the federal government has appealed that judgment and kept him in what they call a protective custody. So that's why the series of protests have gone on. The protesters have actually tried to get their demands met by the government, but it has prolonged. They've gone to the courts, they see it as prolonging, and maybe that's the reason they're protesting now at the National Assembly, to see if the lawmakers can wade into the issue. So whether their demands will be met, time will have to tell.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Phil Ihaza, joining us there live from Abuja, Nigeria. Well, time now for us to take a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. We look at potential progress in China-US trade talks. And more reaction after the conviction of Bosco Ntaganda by the International Criminal Court.
Africa, the most iconic wildlife destination in the world. Its unique ecosystems were formed over countless eons. Many people can only dream of visiting this natural paradise. But now, for the first time ever, CGTN Wild Wonderland live show is bringing Africa to you through all of our online platforms. 14 episodes from July 22nd to 28th take you to adventure through the Great Plains of Kenya's Masai Mara, the Serengeti in Tanzania, and the Greater Kruger Park in South Africa. Welcome aboard the wildest ride of a lifetime. This is Wild Wonderland live show, only on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Welcome back. There's potential progress in China-US trade talks. Chinese Vice Premier Liu He and Commerce Minister Zhong Shan spoke over the phone with US Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer and Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin. Tuesday's phone call was the first official contact since trade talks resumed just over a week ago. China's Ministry of Commerce said they talked about implementing the agreement reached between the presidents of the two countries on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Osaka. Meanwhile, the Chinese Foreign Ministry has responded to comments made earlier by the White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow. He said trade talks between China and the U.S. were going well, adding it's very important for China to purchase American agricultural products during negotiations.
Agricultural trade is important for China-US talks. The two sides should try to find solutions to this issue on the basis of equality and mutual respect.
And turning now to news from the Democratic Republic of Congo, a legislator from the country's northeastern province of Ituri has praised the International Criminal Court for delivering a guilty verdict against former rebel leader Bosco Ntaganda. Francois Deda says the judgment will send a strong message to other warlords and help end impunity. CGTN's Christo Chomringa has more from Kinshasa.
Bosco Ntaganda was the leader of a rebel group that carried out widespread atrocities in northeastern DRC between 2002 and 2003. The ICC found him guilty of 18 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity after hearing the testimony of over 2,000 victims. Noda Luafa is a Congolese who fled the conflict in Ituri province in 2003.
In 2003, Bosco Ntaganda wanted to kill my child in Ituri province. We were forced to flee the ethnic conflict between the Hema and the Lendu.
Bosco Ntaganda was known as the Terminator for his ruthlessness. His conviction has been welcomed by leaders from Ituri province and other Congolese across the country.
That verdict will serve as a good example to the Congolese population and the government that impunity won't be tolerated. We want to see real justice in our country.
Ntaganda deserves to be locked up. We were in Bunia during the ethnic conflict, and what we saw still haunts us to date. Not even animals can do what Ntaganda's fighters did.
After a 3-year trial, the ICC found him guilty of mass killings, rape, and the recruitment of child soldiers. His sentence will be determined at a later date. At least 800 people are believed to have been murdered by Bosco Ntaganda's fighters in the Ituri province conflict. Many Congolese hope the ICC verdict, while delivering justice, will also provide some comfort to those affected by the killings. Chris Sochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Meanwhile, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, Fatou Bensouda, has asked judges to approve war crimes and crimes against humanity charges against a man suspected of committing atrocities in Timbuktu, Mali. Al-Hassan Abdul Aziz is suspected of destroying cultural monuments and enforcing policies that led to the sexual enslavement of women and girls.
In a hearing to determine whether her case against Malian suspect Al-Hassan can proceed, prosecutor Fatou Bensouda argued that he bore important responsibility for abuses against the civilian population during the 2012 to 2013 conflict in northern Mali.
As soon as they took over the city, members of the Ansar Dine and Akim created bodies of control and repression. In particular, they created the Islamic police, of which Al-Hassan Abdulaziz, suspected before this court, was the de facto head, inescapable and zealous.
The ICC prosecutor added these abuses constituted crimes against humanity according to the Rome Statute.
They subjugated the men and women of Timbuktu to their power, invoking and above all imposing their religious views, making great use of brutality and abuses that constitute crime against humanity and war crimes according to the Rome Statute.
But lawyers for Al-Hassan said he was innocent of wrongdoing and his case should be dismissed before it begins, as the ICC had failed to disclose evidence that could potentially exonerate Al-Hassan.
But the prosecutor has conducted its investigations into the events in Timbuktu with its eyes wide shut.
Judges have not yet set a date for a decision. Al-Hassan is the second suspect from Mali appearing before the ICC. In 2017, fellow Ansar Dine member Ahmed Al-Faki Al-Mahdi pleaded guilty to the destruction of cultural heritage and for his participation in smashing Timbuktu mausoleums. He was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Al-Mahdi is expected to appear as a witness against Al-Hassan if the charges against him are confirmed. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Meanwhile, the 7th batch of the Chinese peacekeeping force has been deployed to Mali. A total of 38 Chinese peacekeepers landed in the conflict-torn region of Menaka in the east of the country. They are there to carry out engineering tasks at the request of the United Nations multidimensional integrated stabilization mission. The peacekeepers will spend 10 months in Menaka building security facilities and boardrooms for the UN camp. Menaka is one of the most dangerous places in Mali. The local administration is still controlled by anti-government armed forces. This year alone, there have been 38 terror attacks in the area.
We should make sure that when facing emergencies, every peacekeeper can remember how to avoid danger, know battle positions clearly, and be familiar with the process of handling emergency situations. During the time in Menaka, we need to fulfill the tasks appointed by MINUSMA, but we also need to protect the personal safety of our peacekeepers. We should ensure our peacekeepers finish the task safely and in high quality.
Now, the United Nations mission in South Sudan officially opened its first base on the western side of the Nile. The base is aimed at supporting peace-building efforts with the hope of attracting humanitarian groups into the area. Both conflict and natural disasters have hampered aid groups from accessing the area to offer much-needed support.
During the 6 years of civil war, Kodok in the western part of the Nile in South Sudan was largely abandoned as thousands fled violence in the area. But in the wake of a new peace agreement and support from the United Nations, the residents are beginning to return.
Very important for us to be here strategically. One, it's on the western side of the Nile, so it's difficult to get to if we don't have a base actually here. Secondly, what we're hoping to do is to attract humanitarians into the area, and they will be able to provide services for the large number of people that are starting to come back. Many people fled 2 years ago. They're trickling back. They'll come back more frequently if they've got an ability to get services, education, health services, those sorts of things. That's what we're trying to do.
To help create a safe environment for displaced families coming home, UNMISS deployed peacekeepers to the area last year but has now officially opened its base, the first to be located on the western side of the Nile. Approximately 85 peacekeepers have been deployed and civilian staff will arrive in the coming weeks.
It's very difficult to get a base built here. During the rainy season it becomes almost impossible to move. Obviously, getting across the river, getting materials brought in, had to be all done by air. But once it was done, the Indian workers and the company there working alongside the British soldiers did a fantastic job of setting it up, improved the bridge so that the local population has ability to move up and down the area as well. I just think they've done a great job. They've done an excellent job for the UN and also for the local community.
In addition to their official duties, the peacekeepers are also helping the community develop their skills in rebuilding their lives, including training veterinary health workers to treat livestock and providing vocational training to help young people secure jobs so they can support themselves. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Meanwhile, South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has apologized to his people, with the country unable to afford to hold celebrations to commemorate the 8th anniversary of independence. CGTN's Patrick Oyet reports from Juba.
Sasten Tangun has been an active member of South Sudan's ruling party, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, since 1983. Tangun was resettled in Australia, where he lived for more than 20 years, mobilizing support for SPLM. He returned to South Sudan in 2007 to try and help the country gain independence after the Comprehensive Peace Agreement.
When the CPA was signed, then some of us felt that, okay, this is not the right time for us to come here. The reason why we had to come was, one, to help sensitize the South Sudanese about the importance of independence for South Sudan.
Tangun lost his mother as a result of the war, which then broke out in 2013. He says he feels let down by South Sudanese politicians.
If you are a South Sudanese or a liberator, you are given a responsibility to handle public money, and you embezzle that money for your own good, you are not a liberator. You are not at all. You cannot convince me, neither can you convince anybody that you are a liberator.
Tangun says he won't celebrate independence until peace has fully taken hold.
South Sudan's government says it is committed to implementing the peace deal it signed with opposition groups last year to ensure that peace returns to the country, but with some armed groups opposed to the current peace arrangement, only a few people here are optimistic about the return of peace.
Civil war created economic crisis in the country. Civil servants have gone for 6 months without salaries. Inflation has pushed prices of basic goods beyond the reach of many.
I want to sincerely apologize to you, my people, on my own behalf and on behalf of the government, for those failures. Let me admit that Over the last 4 years, my government encountered very serious financial challenges, some of which are the result of weak governance in our revenue-generating institutions, but mainly due to the internal war.
For people like Tangun, even if Independence Day can't be celebrated, he says it is a call to all the people of South Sudan to rise up above the current violence and bring lasting peace to the country. Patrick Oyet, CGTN, Juba, South Sudan.
After the break, we bring you your latest business news. Coming up, unions in Zimbabwe reject a $21 million pay increment from the government. And South African exporters welcome the rollout of the Africa Free Trade Agreement.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
In your business news, Zimbabwe's unions have rejected a government offer to increase their salaries for July through December. The government has offered civil servants $21 million for the period. The amount, which was to be shared by more than 300,000 civil servants, would see each worker receive an additional $11.28 a month. Unions, however, say the amount is inadequate in the face of soaring inflation. The lowest paid public sector worker earns about $50, which unions say has been hit by inflation of 97.85% in May. Currency reforms introduced last month to ban the use of foreign currencies have done little to instill confidence that people's living standards will improve. On top of that, the Southern African nation is grappling with a severe shortage of fuel, bread, medicines, and on top of that, 17-hour power delays. Now to South Africa, where the introduction of the operational phase of the African Continental Free Trade Agreement has been hailed as a potential game changer for the continent. The ability to now trade tariff-free is, for many Western Cape companies in South Africa, an encouraging sign of the significant benefits associated with being part of the world's single largest market. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more.
The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement is considered as an ambitious plan that is meant to drive through greater integration on the continent, not just through goods, but also through people. With a combined population of over 1.2 billion people, many trade experts believe intra-African trade can be significantly boosted from the current level of just 17%.
The basic idea behind this agreement is to boost intra-African trade, because Africans do not really trade that much with each other. The intra-African trade compared to the rest of the world is at very low levels. So we can do a lot if we make it easier to trade. Now, how will we do that? If we can lower the tariffs, if we can make the rules of origin easier, if we can deal with the red tape and the infrastructure and the transport systems. So there's a lot to be done.
And that means major growth is possible for many Western Cape companies, with aspirations of having their products across the continent.
We are very optimistic about the growth opportunity. And we're not, there's a lot of challenges in Africa, but we're not discouraged with regards to those challenges. We go into this market and we really want to penetrate those markets. Our rose juice range is very high in demand across Africa and also now into the Chinese markets as well.
What the ratification of the agreement also means is that local businesses may not be beholden to what they perceive as unfair trade practices from some markets they currently operate in. One of the spin-offs of the trade agreement is that it could catapult South Africa's economy to a higher growth trajectory and lift the GDP. And in the Western Cape, that means not only more money for local companies, but more job opportunities for locals as well. Douglas Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Meanwhile, Cote d'Ivoire's President Alassane Ouattara has expressed optimism that Western African countries will establish a common currency for the region by 2020. This after meeting conditions to join the initiative set to boost cross-border trade and economic development. In June, the Economic Community of West African States reached an agreement to name the currency ECO. Currently, 8 member states, Benin, Burkina Faso, Guinea-Bissau, Cote d'Ivoire, Mali, Niger, Senegal and Togo, jointly use the CFA franc. The region's economic powerhouse, Nigeria, is projected to dominate the future currency zone, making it skeptical about the benefits. ECOWAS leaders have acknowledged that the 2020 target date is tough, but will strive to push through the stumbling blocks.
The heads of state of ECOWAS have decided that together at 15 we will put in place a new currency called ECO. So, in the long run, the CFA franc will be called ECO. We will continue to work on it. We hope that this can be done as soon as possible. Countries that are ready, such as countries in the West African Monetary Union Zone that are ready and have made significant efforts in terms of good management, good governance, deficit control, and debt control, will probably be ready in 2020. It will be up to the heads of state of this zone to take a decision. It's not for me to say.
Airtel Africa has finally listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange, making it the second mobile telco to list on the exchange this year. MTN had earlier listed on the exchange by introduction back in May this year, but unlike its main rival, Airtel listed 3.7 billion shares through an IPO. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
We can start putting in our orders and start trading.
With those few words from the CEO of the Nigerian Stock Exchange, Oscar Onyema, Airtel Africa officially became the latest telecoms company to be listed on the main board of the exchange. It's a secondary cross-border listing after the primary listing was done on the London Stock Exchange on June the 28th. For local investors, Airtel Africa's listing on the local bourse is a fulfillment of their long-term push to have telecoms companies operating in the country to list on the exchange. And within a space of roughly 2 months, they now have 2 of the big players in the industry on the continent listed, MTN in May and now Airtel.
In spite of the challenges, it's been an interesting journey, and we're very, very pleased that Nigeria was the second exchange that was chosen in addition to London, and that we've crossed the finish line. We look forward to a shared prosperity, especially when we consider mobile money, financial inclusion, and the huge possibilities that arise from that.
Investors have listened to our story, and are very interested enough to invest in our business, and are now ready to share the future with us. Nigeria, which is one of our 14 countries, is a great place for business, and Airtel Africa remains committed to building a leadership position here and in our other 13 African markets.
Opening at an offer price of 360 naira or slightly over $1 per share, Airtel share price gained 10% on its first few minutes of trading, closing the day at almost 400 naira. The $4.4 billion listing also pushed up the exchange's market capitalization, with the all-share index also rising.
Airtel listing is one of the listings that the community has been waiting for, and we are very happy and thank those who have worked tirelessly to ensure that this listing came to pass. The expectation we have, or the investors we have, one, they are now listed, they are now a public limited liability company. There is a PLC. They will need to meet all the post-listing requirements of the Nigerian Stock Exchange and also SEC. They should make sure the market gets timely information so that brokers will be able to price their shares appropriately. And they should also hold strongly to corporate governance.
With over 45 million subscribers in Nigeria, Airtel is the third biggest operator in the country's telecoms industry, and now the third largest quoted company by market capitalization on the Nigerian Stock Exchange after Dangote and MTN. The firm plans to use part of the funds generated from the IPO to cut down on its debt and expand its operations in the country. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Rapid population growth, mainly concentrated in sub-Saharan Africa, has brought a series of economic and social development problems, including food insecurity, to the continent. China has been cooperating with African countries to share its experience in sustainable food production. CGTN's Brian Toussaint has more.
Under Yuan Longping, agriculture expert from China, have made efforts to successfully produce a variety of rice varieties suitable for local soil and climate. The latest data on the measurement of production has been recognized by local agriculture minister Lucien Rana Livru.
From 3 tons to 9 tons or even 12 tons, the use of hybrid rice seeds will greatly increase rice production in Madagascar.
In Uganda, local rice cultivation is considered as a strategic industry to ensure food security.
Every corner of the country, at least people can sustain having food, and people can learn how to grow rice so that they can have food in their homes.
We planted 4,000 acres this year, almost producing 12,000 tons, equivalent to 5% of Uganda's total rice production.
China-Africa Agricultural Cooperation is not limited to technology. Some Chinese companies have already targeted African agricultural markets, invested in agriculture, extended the grain industry chain, and increased the value of agricultural products. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN.
Well, that's where we leave your business news. Here's what's still ahead on the program. Coming up, we hear from a galaxy of stars featuring in a remake of a Disney classic with rich African content.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The cast of The Lion King descended on Los Angeles' Hollywood Boulevard on Tuesday for the world premiere of the remake of the Disney classic. With stunning scenery of Africa and some talking wildlife, the new movie is made with the aid of computer-generated imagery.
The Lion King movie follows the plot of the Oscar-winning 1994 animation about lion cub Simba, who flees his kingdom after his villainous uncle Scar connives to take his father Mufasa's place as king.
I find the story timeless. You learn so much from this movie. This is not just entertainment. I think it's a movie for everyone. It's a movie about life. It's about the circle of life, how we are all connected. It's about love and hate. It's about being greedy, over hunting, trust, friendship. It's about life.
It boasts a voice cast that includes music star Beyonce and actors Donald Glover,
Hakuna Matata,
Chiwetel Ejiofor, Seth Rogen, and James Earl Jones, who also voiced Mufasa in the 1994 version.
Yeah, I mean, I'm playing Scar, and that's really exciting. Scar is this, I think one of the most iconic characters ever committed to any kind of medium, and so really fun to step into that role and to tell the story. I think that it's just a great bit of classic storytelling, and that's what's made it iconic.
Simba, look at the stars.
Can you feel the love tonight?
Like the 1994 showpiece, music played an important role in enhancing the story. Pharrell Williams and Donald Glover collaborated with Beyonce on the music score.
I just listened to what she had to teach me. Like I think it's
Only very few times do you get to work with somebody as iconic as Beyonce is. So I felt like it was something where I was like, oh, okay, like we're like blending this thing together. So let me just listen to what she's doing and like play off of that and make sure like, you know, the story's going well.
Beyonce is just the most perfect, professional. But she was so into it. I mean, she played us this piece of music which was just flawless. It was flawless from the word go, you know. And you know, and then I mean, like Donald was just great because he's a musician as well, you know.
Searches for what he can give.
And beyond the massive success realized in the silver screens, The Lion King has also been successful in the musical theatres, with versions still running on New York's Broadway and in London.
It's like a recipe that will be delicious forever. Like, it just works, you know, and it's hard to have that, but if you do, you can make a lot of money off it.
This 2019 interpretation hopes to draw a new global audience into the inspirational tale of destiny set in Africa.
What resonates with us is this sense of destiny and that there's a character, a protagonist who decides, hey, I could just keep living my life this way, or I could really embrace my destiny and move into it. No matter how scary it is, no matter how dangerous it is, I think there's a little part of all of us that always wants to do that. And sometimes we do it, and sometimes we don't. So it's wish fulfillment. It's wish fulfillment, and I think that's what's been sticking with us for 25 years.
The film is the latest Disney remake to hit screens this year and is directed by Jon Favreau, who was behind the 2016 remake of The Jungle Book. It officially opens in the US cinemas on July the 19th.
And so will I.
Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Now, a garbage dump in the Democratic Republic of Congo's bustling capital, Kinshasa, may be an odd place to seek inspiration, but Congolese musician and founder of the Fulu Muziki group, Pisco Crane, recycles materials from there to create his band's unique sound. CGTN's Astatal has the story.
I see this bottle and I can see that it will provide a good sound. It'll give me a good do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So this will make a good instrument for our music.
Fulu Muziki means music from the garbage in the local Lingala language. From their colorful performances, one cannot imagine that musical instruments made from garbage are behind the band's alluring music. They create special tools from pieces of rubbish in efforts to promote recycling in a country that is said to produce over 9,000 tons of waste daily.
My wish is to see this music genre recognized worldwide and also raise awareness on the importance of waste management, especially in Africa.
The group uses scrap metal, plastic bottles, tins, or water pipes to make their instruments. Lack of proper waste management and recycling facilities has seen Kinshasa become littered with discarded plastic bags and other waste. This often blocks the city's drainage system.
Some may throw away things, and I look for ways to reuse what has been thrown away, because waste is not good for our health.
When Fulu Muziki takes the stage, they often bewilder their audience with their unusual tools. Their elaborate costumes are also made from recycled material. The showstopper, however, is their unique sound.
This group really impressed everyone, especially the fact that the instruments they play with were sourced from waste and they managed to make everyone dance. It's really extraordinary. Look at the way I have been sweating from dancing. They created a great atmosphere. They were amazing.
The group may not have the solution to DRC's vast garbage problems, but with a positive message and their hypnotic music, they are succeeding in raising environmental protection awareness among their fans. Brian Toussaint, CGTN.
Well, let's take a short break. Your sports news up next.